welcome everybody, and I see most of you have been put on mute, and I've just been given permission to mute and unmute people at will. I'd like to introduce, first of all, myself, John Halsey. I am a trustee of the Royal School of Church Music, and it's my job to host this session and to welcome everybody who's signed up for listening to, or I'm going to admit someone now, to Joanna Forbes L'Estrange, who's going to be talking about particularly harmony in
melody
relation to composition and towards the Harold Smart competition. And thanks for joining us.
John, sorry to interrupt. I'm talking about melody.
Okay, I got the wrong. I think I got the wrong brief rather than the fact that I had memory lapse, but it could have been either. And so we're talking about melody, and certainly knowing something of your compositions, that makes great sense. And so over to you, Joanna. And if there are questions, please put them in the chat, and later on, then we'll have some open call and response to some questions. Roughly how long do you plan to speak, Joanna?
I think we'll go for about 45 minutes.
That's great.
Okay. So aiming to finish at about 1:45, if that works. Is it possible for me to see everybody on the screen?
Well, it's up to individuals to switch on or switch off their video.
Oh, I see.
And it's entirely up to everyone's preference, and depending on where they are or whatever preference they may have, that's up to individuals to decide.
Okay.
But obviously it's nice as a speaker if you can see people, because you can judge the reaction, and
exactly,
it's much a higher quality
much
session,
preferable.
but it may not be appropriate for people to
yes.
depending on the circumstances. That's great. So Mark switched on his video, which is nice to see, Mark, and others. That's entirely up to you. Thanks, Steve. Okay, let's not take any longer, and Joanna, please take it away.
Thank you. Well, it's so wonderful to be talking about melody, because for me, melody is at the crux of every kind of piece of music. If you think back to folk song, think back to Gregorian chant, and then if we think about pop songs and jazz songs and hymn tunes, melody for me is at the center of everything, and it's so important to me. And the composers that I revere the most are the ones who can really write a fabulous melody. Thinking of hymn tunes of old that everybody loves to sing. For me, it's a way of elevating the text as well. So if a melody doesn't elevate a text or explain something about the text that wasn't there with just the pure reading of it, then my feeling is that you'd be better off just reading it rather than to have it set to music. It can be a wonderful device as well for the listener who's going to be hearing your piece of music, to hear a melody which speaks to them. And then when the melody returns as well, that sense of familiarity is such a powerful tool in composition. So for me, melody is almost a magical aspect of composing. It's funny because at the moment I'm in San Diego, I'm in California. It's the middle of the night, so I'm very grateful that I'm in a separate house rather than a hotel room. Otherwise, my neighbor would be thinking I'd gone mad playing the piano in the middle of the night. But it's interesting because on the plane over a couple of days ago, I was watching a documentary about George Michael and how he came up with his "Last Christmas, I Gave You My Heart," very famous Christmas pop song, which I'm sure some of you will have heard. And for him, the melody and the words came instantaneously together. And he said he almost doesn't know where it came from. It just plopped into his head. For me, that has only happened once. Most of the time, it's in the reading of the text that the melody comes. So I'm going to take as my example today my setting of Christina Rossetti's poem Love Came Down at Christmas. I think my husband Alexander, when he led the harmony session on Monday, took his setting of Love Came Down. So I thought it would be a fun way to present you with a different setting. So in the reading of these words, I always start by reading words aloud to myself, because I find that as I hear them and as I speak them, the elements of the melody begin to reveal themselves to me. So when I wrote the words, love came down at Christmas, immediately the melody and the rhythm and the cadence began to suggest to me a compound time. So 6/8 or 12/8 as opposed to 2/4 or 4/4. Love came down at Christmas. So that was the first thing. And then because the word is love came down, I wanted the melody to descend, to reflect that it came down. And then because the most important syllable in that little 5-word phrase is of Christmas, I wanted that to be the highest note of the melody. And so straight away, just from 5 words, so much of what was going to become the melody for my setting had revealed itself to me. And then another aspect of melody, which I think is so powerful, is reserving the higher notes in your melody for the most important aspects of, most important words of the poem or Bible verse that you're setting. So starting with Love Came Down at Christmas, I had this melody. Love came down at Christmas. Just because A major felt like such a sparkly key. Every key has such a different mood and feeling. And also the advantage of something like A major is that your highest note, maybe your 5th of the key, is still well within the grasp of most choirs, the tenors and the sopranos who might be taking the higher notes within the choir. And this is something else I really care deeply about, is that melodies feel comfortable to sing. Unless you're setting a word about the pain of Jesus on the cross on an Easter piece, and then you want to reflect that in your words. But when you're setting a text like Love Came Down at Christmas, you don't want, in my opinion, any element of discomfort. You want that comfort. So there was my opening melody. And what pleased me about that was it was within that 6th, that major 6th, the whole melody already existed. Then for the second line of the poem, she wrote, love all lovely, love divine. I love that, because she could so easily have written something like Love Came Down at Christmas, and wasn't it great? And wasn't it wonderful that Jesus was suddenly amongst us or something? But no, she chooses to use the word love 3 more times in the second line. And so for me, that meant that something special had to happen with the melody on those words, love, on the reiterations of the word love. And so I've already had love on an A. Love came down at Christmas. Then I return to the A for love again. But this time, love, oh, love divine. So I've now extended my range from a 6th to a 7th. So I feel as if the love is growing through the extension of that 6th to that 7th. And then Love Came Down at Christmas. She says again, the third line is the same as the first line. And for that, I've gone down to the F sharp minor, a relative minor of the A that I started in. Love came down at Christmas. So still within this seventh, the same rhythm as, but for this one it's, so you've got the same rhythm, but you're now opening out by moving up to the D. And then the final line of this opening, this first verse of her 3-verse poem is star and angel gave a sign. And so star, I wanted to be the highest note so far, because it made me think immediately of a star on the top of the tree. You can see the star on the top of this lovely tree in the room where I am. But it's the highest point so far of the melody. Then we return to the home key. Go back to A. So within those 4 lines, I felt, and I didn't, obviously it doesn't come immediately, it's not as fast as that, but as I spoke and as I sang those words, that's the melody that came. Yes.
Joanna, some people have asked me to feed back to you that sometimes when you sing and play simultaneously,
they're getting one or the other.
Yeah, Zoom
yes.
technology wins and unfortunately cuts it out.
Fine, so I'll just do singing instead of playing.
Yeah, that's one or the other.
One or the other. Great, safest. Thank you for that. So when I've done that, when I'd finished that first verse, and I had an element of word painting with the love came down, and I had the compound rhythm, pleasure, Albert, no worries at all, and the compound time, and the structure, I realized also that this melody had given me my key structure, my tonal structure for the piece, because the main elements of the A and the F sharp and the C sharp of love came down at Christmas ended up being my tonal structure for the whole piece, because the middle verse is in F sharp minor, and then the final verse is in D flat or C sharp major. So for me, this is why melody is so important, because not only does it elevate the words and give something for the audience / congregation to hook onto and to feel familiar with, but it also informs my tonal structure for the whole piece. So everything springs from the melody. There's a wonderful Quincy Jones quote about melody. He said that melody is the voice of God. And I feel that. I felt that once I had the melody for this, that somehow a higher voice was speaking through these words. And so I ended up with a melody that spanned an octave and no more. And that's something else that I feel so passionately about, is that if you can keep your main melody within an octave, as so many of the main famous hymn tunes do, not only does it make it infinitely more singable by lots of choirs, because it's not extending too far in the vocal range, but there's something just intrinsically pleasing about a melody that sits within the parameters of one octave. So that's something that I would really recommend to you. And if you don't stay within an octave, do it for a reason. Do it rather than that's just how it happened. Make it a deliberate point that you're going outside the octave. So within this piece, I then wanted an accompaniment, because it was an unaccompanied piece. So I wanted the other voices in the SATB piece to provide the accompaniment for this melody. And because love came down was the title of the whole piece, and because love is the most important word in the piece, I came up with this repeating almost sort of ostinato pattern. And for this, I won't sing, I'll just play. So this is what the tenors and basses and altos sing at the beginning of the piece, to the words, love came down, oh, love came down. And so on top of that,
Yeah.
love.
Uh, I'm sorry, the piano or the keyboard is not coming through. Just a message to Sam. If you're there, Sam, you may be able to change the Zoom settings, and which is something I've been able to do in the past. Um, you might like to have a go at that. But
I'll just not use the piano at all.
yeah, unfortunately, the technology is filtering out the piano because it's
Don't worry,
considered
that's
it's,
fine.
some pollution or something,
Yes,
sound
I'll
pollution,
just
whereas in
not,
fact
I'll
it's the
just,
one we want to hear. Sorry
no, no,
about
no,
that.
I won't use it. So underneath the soprano in my setting begins, the melody is the first to sing the melody. The tenors sing the melody for verse 2, and the altos sing the melody for verse 3. I don't have the basses singing the melody. If I'd had a fourth verse, if Christina Rossetti had written her fourth verse, I might have given the basses a go. But I love the idea that with melody, everybody can have a chance at being the person who's carrying the words while the other voices accompany. So without playing the piano now, I just want to show you by singing to you what the other voices sing at the opening. So this compound time melody I put into the accompaniment. The altos are singing, love came down, oh, love came down. Love came down, oh, love came. And they keep singing that underneath. Love came down at Christmas. So you've got this lilting compound crotchet, quaver, crotchet, quaver, crotchet, quaver, which gives a lovely lilt underneath. So although I'm talking to you about melody, can you see how the melody also informs the accompaniment pattern, also informs the tonal structure, also informs the overall structure, the sense of coming home when you hear the melody again. So this is why I feel that melody is so important. And then moving on to verse 2, the tenors now have the tune. So what I've done here is the opening melody is in A major. La da dee 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 ya. When the tenors have it, worship we the Godhead. I've modified that first interval because I've gone into F sharp minor, absolutely desperate to play it on the piano, not going to do that. So we're now in F sharp minor, and the other voices, love came down, oh, love came down. Because this middle verse, worship we the Godhead, love incarnate, love divine, worship we our Jesus, but wherewith for sacred sign, question mark. This middle verse screamed minor tonality to me. And so this is how we have moved into the relative minor of F sharp minor. And this is a device that I've used before, actually. Drop, drop, slow tears. If you know my setting of drop, drop, slow tears, I've done a similar thing. And it works really well. So now, because we're in F sharp minor, I didn't want love shall be, worship we the Godhead. Wow, I can tell it's the middle of the night. I don't normally have a low E. So now, worship we the Godhead, love incarnate, love divine. Worship we our Jesus. Now it's the same as the sopranos have in the first melody, in the first verse, finishing, but wherewith for sacred sign. And we finish back in A, where we belong. But then I wanted to do something magical for the melody in the final third verse, which is really the crux of the whole poem that she's written. And so I used 2 bars, which again, I won't play to you because of this issue with the piano, but where I modulate from A major into D flat major, and I use love came down, oh love came down. 2 bars of that accompanying riff melody. Instead of love came down, oh love came down, I've gone love came down, oh love came down, and now we're in D flat major. So for the final verse, we've got the altos. Love shall be a token. And what's lovely about this is that it gave me the sopranos spare to add a descant. And there's something so wonderful in, and I mean, I think we thank John Rutter for this. There's so often that structure of melody, melody, and then final verse melody with descant. And it just screams Christmas to me. And so with this, I'm able to have the sopranos singing while the altos are singing, love shall be our token. I've got the soprano singing, love. And now I do extend the sopranos up 1 pitch, love, going up to the E flat. But I've done it on purpose. So I've gone beyond the octave remit of the alto melody just by 1 tone, just by 1 tone. But by doing that, it gives a sort of special magical sparkle to the soprano line in that fine. It's not very high. It doesn't go up to an F or a high A flat or even a B flat. It doesn't need to, because even just by going up 1 tone to the E flat, it gives that effect that we all know and love in a descant. So that's it. I want to allow you lots of time to ask me questions, and also to talk about the words that you are setting for this year's Harold Smart competition. But I hope that that brief explanation of how I came up with the melody for my setting of Love Came Down at Christmas will give you some insights into why I feel that melody is such an important element of composition, but also how melodies come to us. So let's have some questions from our participants.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Joanna. And I'm as a first approach, could I ask those who'd like to ask a question to put a question in the chat? With any luck, most of you will be familiar with the chat. Several of you have already used it to express frustration about the piano not working, for example.
I can see the chat actually, so I can see that Mark has put a question there. So if you like,
great.
John.
Now, once we've dealt with some questions coming through from the chat, then if there's anyone else, for example, if you can't find how to operate the chat, then by all means do unmute yourself, and we'll have a chance to ask a question as well. But Joanna, if you could, I've got one question, but I'm not going to ask it first. So let's go to Mark first of all.
Mark's question, yeah. So I'm just having a look now at Psalm 100, so that I can familiarise myself.
So Mark's question, while you're looking, could you?
Yes, I've got
he's asking, could you say something about text with different or odd lengths of the lines, where melody works for one line but doesn't balance with the previous line?
Yes. So let me. Which version of Psalm 100 have you set them for this competition? Is it the NIV version? Shout for the joy to the Lord. Is it that one, or is it the King James version? King James version, right? Let me just find that, because it would be good to have the correct one in front of me. Here we go. Psalm 100. Yes, because that's a really interesting question. King James Version. Here we go. Make a joyful noise. Oh yes, this is wonderful because I've recently composed a choral reimagining of the Four Seasons, and for the da da dum dum da da dum dum da da dum da for the first movement of autumn, I've used this psalm actually. So now when I see make a joyful noise, that's the tune that I'm hearing in my head. But yes, that's a good question. So could I say something about text with different and odd line lengths where melody works for one line but doesn't balance with the previous line? How do you find what text? Okay, yes, to deal with that first of all. So there are various things you can do. Having different phrase lengths is actually fine in melody. You know, Brahms did this a lot, didn't he? You know, you might have one phrase which is 3 bars long and one phrase followed by a 5-bar phrase, followed by a 4-bar phrase. And that's absolutely fine. It can become a feature of the piece. So I would say in that instance, don't feel you need to squash the syllables of the lines to make them all even, but instead turn that into a feature. So I haven't set Psalm 100 yet, other than with my Vivaldi, in which case the music already existed and it was a matter of putting the words to the tune, which is a reversal of what we're talking about. But if I look at that, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. That's the rhythm that's coming to me. So make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Yes, I definitely, if I was setting this now, I would make a feature of the fact that the lines are different lengths. And I love that make a joyful noise is so, it's just so imperative. You know, it's not, shall we make a joyful noise? Or, you know, oh, I can hear a joyful noise, but make a joyful noise unto the Lord. I would be so inspired to put that as my downbeat of the verse. Equally, make a joyful noise. You could do it as an upbeat because the word joyful is so crucial there. There's so much you can do with this. These are wonderful words to set. How many verses have you been given? I'm looking in the chat. 4 verses, right? So enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him and bless his name. Oh, wonderful! I can't wait to see what you all come up with for those 4 verses. So, Mark, I hope that helps. So, different and odd line lengths. I would say make a feature of that, celebrate that. And then Albert, how do you find what text to put music to? Oh, I see. Well, often for me, it's a matter of having been commissioned by a choir, so they will give the text to me. But sometimes I write my own texts. I hope I'm interpreting your question correctly. Pleasure, Mark, my pleasure. Yeah, so sometimes I write my own texts. In the case of the Vivaldi Four Seasons piece, it was very interesting because obviously the music already existed and I was looking for texts to fit the music on the subjects of spring, summer, autumn and winter. And then the internet was just invaluable because I was researching different texts for that. Anybody else got a question?
So Albert, has Joanna answered the question you intended? Or did we interpret that correctly?
Great, great. So who else might have a question for me in the chat?
Now, at the moment, Albert and Mark have asked. I don't see any other questions at the moment. Please do ask. I'm going to ask one in the meantime. So, Joanna, where you took a hint from the words to move you in the direction of a minor key, and you went to the relative minor. Now, when you were singing that, the minor came through very clearly, but it just occurred to me you were singing, or you'd chosen quite a modal sort of minor. Didn't feel like the harmonic minor. I'm not sure I heard, the
Yes, it was
raised
more of
seventh of the scale or anything. I heard maybe a flattened seventh and flattened sixth. So
yes.
maybe you could talk about the different opportunities within within minor.
Yes, within minor, well, obviously you've got all of the modes as well. So you've got Dorian mode and Aeolian mode, and that I love a minor key. I mean, I will always choose my favorite key in the whole wide world is F sharp minor. I think it sounds like purple velvet. It's such a luxurious sounding key. But I love the Dorian mode and the Aeolian mode as well. And I think it can create such an otherworldly sense of sort of modality to your piece, and it's definitely something worth exploring. And it's lovely to return to the Gregorian chants. Actually, when I wrote my Advent O Carol, I looked at the original chant for those Advent antiphons, and they were so inspirational. I mean, the melody writing 500 years ago is so stunning, and also this idea of keeping within a sixth, keeping within those sort of those ranges springs from there actually. So there's so much to be gained from just looking at those, pulling up those Gregorian chants and singing them. But I think when I'm writing, it's funny actually. I had a question yesterday, similar question from a student here in San Diego. I did a clinic, as they call them, with their choir, and a student said to me, "How do you not get bogged down in the workings of music while you're creating?" And I said that's a really good question, because even though I studied music at Oxford University, and I'm very sort of classically trained musician and composer, when I'm in the flow of creating a piece, I almost deliberately push all that aside, because I find that it's almost more of a hindrance to think too much about what minor mode or key am I going to use and why, but just to almost let the music come of its own accord and then fiddle about with the details later. I'm sure not every composer writes it in this way, but I'm very inspired by authors who say that when they are writing a book, they want to almost write stream of consciousness and not self-edit too much as they go along, because the self-editing process, yes.
Yeah, so that's great, and I particularly I'm going to go straight on to two more questions in just a sec, but I think that what you've just said came through to me very strongly, because it counterbalances something that you said earlier, which was quite analytical. So
Mm.
you went through where did the words lead you in the direction of compound time, movement downwards, emphasis on a particular syllable. That's quite analytical. So you need to
Yes,
hold, and what you're saying is you hold that analysis in sort of, well, you could hold it in abeyance while you listen to the stream of consciousness. And
yes,
it needs to be a bit of
yes,
one and a bit of the other.
that's so true. And I think it's because I began by explaining my process, um, but actually all of that it came sort of afterwards. It came when I had to analyze what it is that I do, because it's a funny thing as a composer to be asked what your process is, because actually you don't normally think about what your process is. It just is your process. But in order to be able to explain it to you today, what it was, I had to analyze it and think, what is it that I did? And sort
Yeah,
of peel back from that. But in the moment of actually writing, I'm just doing it in the moment, in the flow.
great. Thank you. So Paul says our setting includes optional accompaniment for organ. Any hints for how to write this accompaniment? There is a separate session, by the way, on accompaniment writing, but any hints for how to write this other than just duplicating or paralleling the SATB?
Yes, well, the wonderful thing about the organ is that it can really set a mood before the choir enters. So, for example, when I wrote my Winter Light piece, which you can find all of these pieces I keep talking about. You can find them all on Spotify. But with Winter Light, I began with the organ, which played something that was completely unrelated to what the choir was about to sing, because I wanted to set a mood of a wintry scene. So I had the organ starting very low and sort of mysterious, and a very, again, I'm desperate to play, but I'm not going to, kind of chromatic, gnarly melody, which then left everybody feeling quite uncomfortable. That was my intention, that they should feel quite uncomfortable, leaving them on a single E in the middle of the keyboard, pausing, fermata. And I wanted everybody to think, gosh, what on earth's going to happen now? And then when the choir came in, they all started on that same E, and then moved away and came back to it again, and then moved away and came back to it again. And the whole thing was so, I found it so interesting, because until that point, I'd always used organ in my pieces as very much supporting the choir. So as you say, paralleling or playing pretty much what the choir is singing, just to give them a bit of support. But in that piece, I really found myself enjoying the idea of the organ scene setting, because obviously organs have so many different sounds as well. There's so much that you can do. If you're looking at your words again, I'm just going to pull those up again. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Immediately I'm hearing trumpets, the organ stops of the trumpets, and those really sort of brassy, excited sounds. And maybe you could do something similar to what I did in my coronation anthem that I wrote, you know, when King Charles was crowned, and I had this like ba, 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 those kind of trumpety sounds that you get. I would do that with this, you know, this is just off the top of my head. Because then when the choir comes in with Make a Joyful Noise, the congregation / audience is already ready for, this is what we're hearing about now. They haven't heard the words yet, but they sort of know that it's going to be something joyful. So I would say that that's a real advantage of the organ, is in this sort of scene setting. And the other wonderful thing about having the organ is that you can have interludes for the organ where the choir gets a little breather. So unlike with my Love Came Down, which I've been talking about, you know, where pretty much you're on all of the time, you can have these wonderful moments of reprise for the choir where you have a something going on in the organ, which not only gives the choir a little breather, but also gives the listener a moment of excitement to hear the organ coming through to the fore, rather than just using it as an accompaniment. And then finally, at the end of a piece as well, you can finish with the choir and the organ really full. So you're finishing with Be Thankful Unto Him and Bless His Name. Actually, you could approach that so differently, couldn't you? You could have that as almost like a prayer-like finishing, Bless His Name, or Bless His Name, and pull out all the stops literally on the organ. So yes, I would be... that's my pleasure, Paul. Yes, I would be very excited to use the organ. I think because I'm a pianist, not an organist, and my father is an organist, and my husband is an organist, and my son is now an organist. So I've been sort of surrounded by organists all my life, and for some reason it didn't make me want to be one myself. But because of that, I'm very mindful of the fact that when I'm writing, sometimes it comes out quite pianistic. And I make a big effort now to make sure that my accompaniments are very idiosyncratically organistic. Excuse me, glass of water.
Thank you very much indeed. I think everyone will agree that that range of comments on the use of the organ is quite inspiring. So thank you very much. Nick has a question. I don't know whether you could, Nick, you could just write another note, possibly to give more context for this. She says, or he says, what would prompt you to repeat phrases or words or omit perhaps in the accompanying parts.
Yes, again, that's in the reading of the poem aloud, or the verse, as we have now, the psalm verse aloud. Because it's funny, actually, I don't know in your version, in my version, every time the word Lord appears in this internet version I've got here, it's in capitals. So immediately that's the word that jumps out at me. But I would suggest, again, reading aloud is such a useful tool for this. So if we read, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness, come before his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God. Already, I'm hearing that imperative tense. Make, serve, know, enter. It's every single verse of this that you've been given begins with an instruction, a direction. And so those are the words that for me jump out. But also you could interpret it as make a joyful noise unto the Lord. I mean, that is a gift as a composer, because imagine if you began with a joyful noise interpretation on the organ, whatever that says to you. That would be something that would jump out to me as being important to highlight in the accompaniment. So repeating words and phrases, joyful noise, definitely Lord is the word that comes in every verse except verse 4. And then you see it's interesting that they've decided to give you only as far as that, because verse 5 takes on a whole different mood. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. That's a completely different piece, isn't it? That's a description telling us about the Lord being good and his mercy being everlasting. But until that moment, it's bam, make a joyful noise, bam, serve the Lord. Know ye that the Lord is God. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving. So this piece very much is speaking major tonality to me, and very emphatic. Probably something like a 4/4 or a 2/4 is what is coming here. And it's just from the business of speaking these words aloud. Do you think that a strophonic structure would be best for setting music to Psalm 100? Yes, John.
Just continuing with Nick's point. So we've
Oh,
now got the
yes.
clarification, clarifying the previous question, rather than the melodies just setting the words in sequence. Oh, yes. So ideas for picking up or repeating words.
Yes. Well, I mean, the most famous bit of these verses is make a joyful noise, isn't it? So I think that would be a phrase that I would be inclined to repeat. Maybe, I mean, again, I'm thinking off the top of my head here, but what I'm hearing is make a joyful noise as the main theme. Maybe that the organ creates an interpretation of ba 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 ba, make a joyful noise. That maybe that could be a returning theme between each verse, so that the rhythm of that phrase, make a joyful noise, becomes an organ theme almost. That would be a great one, I think, to bring out. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. That's a lovely one as well, isn't it? Into his courts with praise. That, I think, make a joyful noise from that is the one that for me springs out as being worthy of repetition, Nick. Pleasure.
Great. So now just back to Albert's question about writing in verses or strophonic structure.
Yes, I wouldn't for this one personally, because it goes back to one of the questions we had earlier about what do you do if the poem isn't, if the verses aren't all the same length. And I said, I think celebrate that. And I would say with this, unlike the Christina Rossetti, which is a poem with the same scansion and the same line lengths in each verse, unlike that, you've got a psalm here, and every length of every verse has a different length and a different scansion. So I would say I would avoid this the strophonic structure here, and I would make it much more through composed, so that you don't have that thing of what can I do about the fact that verse 4 is so much longer than verse 1. Almost turn that into a feature, I would say. Or another thing you can do with this sort of passage is make verse 1 a sort of refrain. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands, would make a wonderful refrain. So that maybe that's your opening section. And then you go to verse 2, serve the Lord with gladness, come before his presence with singing, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. That could be a lovely, I love the use of refrain actually in pieces, because again, I think for the congregation / audience, it's so lovely for them to have something to hook onto. I did this with my Advent O Carol. I turned the opening into a recurring refrain, and I think that's one of the reasons why people keep telling me that that's their favourite piece of mine, because again, it's something that becomes familiar and almost sort of calming for people. So yes, I would avoid the strophic structure for this personally. That's fine, Paul. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you managed to eat some lunch as well. So if we don't have any other, oh, John, you're muted. I can't hear you. Oh, yes.
Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question, either in the chat, or if you're on video, then put up your hands and I don't know whether you've got the power to unmute yourselves, possibly not. But do indicate if there's anyone else who'd like to ask a question.
I think there's one last thing to say, which is that as you're writing melodies, try not to judge whether it's good or bad in your own opinion as you write it, because I really do feel that these melodies sometimes come from somewhere higher, a higher place, and to interrupt your own flow is almost to doubt where that melody is coming from. Just let it flow, and then at a later date you can come back to it. You know, I'm in the middle of writing a piece at the moment, and I'm listening to myself giving you this advice at the same time, reminding myself to do this. So, you know, we're all our own harshest critics, but I think as you're writing a melody, just try and let it develop almost sort of organically. And then, you know, you can always come back to it the next day and look at it and think, oh, I might change that, or I might tweak that. But I think very rarely would you completely abandon it, because there's something magical in that moment when a melody starts to come.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Just having
Great.
a quick look to see if there's anything else in the chat. Everyone's full of thanks, and thanks for all the helpful tips and everything else. And even we've got applause. That's very impressive use of the Zoom technology, the person who managed to get the applause going around. So
that is impressive.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Joanna.
That's my absolute pleasure. It's been a really interesting experience for me as well to do this in the middle of the night in San Diego.
Yeah, well done for that.
Really nice to see you, and good luck with all your composing, and I look forward to hearing them when they're finished.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.